So today I'm joined by Barbara Buck, who is amongst many other things, I'm sure, is the Facebook boss at Everyday Mindfulness. So hello, Barbara.
Hello.
Hi. Um, can you
I
start?
myself as a boss, sorry.
Sorry, no, wasn't the perfect word there. I was kind of stuck for words, yeah, and boss was
Combination.
all that came out. um, yeah. So can you start us off by uh, saying how you kind of felt before you got into mindfulness? What you think the kind of driving force was that made you need something like that or want something like that?
Right. I'm in my 60s now, and I'd had 50 years of being a very anxious person. I could worry about anything. So my mind was racing all the time. It was always three steps ahead. I mean, a kind of basic example is you're driving into town. I'm three traffic lights ahead. I'm moving into the lane that I'm going to need there. I'm wondering whether there's going to be a parking spot at where I go. If there isn't a parking spot, where else could I go? I have four or five alternatives. What if this road is closed? That's how my mind was every minute of every day about everything. And it was exhausting, and it made me very afraid, very anxious about everything. So it was quite disabling. And my parents had taken me to doctor when I was about 14 because I was having anxiety attacks, panic attacks at school. And I was put on tranquilizers and antidepressants. And so I was medicated right through you going to university. And I had panic attacks during my final exams, so I didn't sit most of my final exams at university, and I got a kind of degree that they award for people who can't do exams, and which was very damaging to my self-esteem. So I was even more depressed. So I hung around in the city I went to university at. Uh, Tried to get jobs, found working full time really stressful. So I was very anxious, got ill all the time, often off sick because I used to catch everything that came, didn't want to be at work, tried various jobs, dropped out for a bit, and did kind of unofficial childcare just to keep going and so on. Um, where to go next? Eventually, I got married, had children, and my dream job came up, which was in a primary school. My children were in primary school at the time, and the job was called a nurture group. And a nurture group in a primary school is for children who can't hack school. So it's for children who arrive at school for the first time. Where we live now, it's very young. They're sort of 3.5, 4, and they're not ready. They've missed the kind of nurturing that a normal, in inverted commas, child would have received, and so they're not ready for school in any way. So the nurture group is set up as a kind of half home, half school. So it has breakfast, and we give them food, and they play, and you read stories to them and fill in those experiences that they didn't have at home. And I loved this job. I was made for this job. I was really, really good at. One of the things I was very good at was being a mummy. Um, I think because of my anxiety experience had made me quite a warm, empathetic person. So seeing an anxious child, I didn't have any problem understanding how they felt and what would make them feel safe and so on. So I loved this job, but I did find it very difficult. I was anxious all the time. I worried about the children, and I tried various things. I used to work full time, then I tried working part time, then I tried working half the week, and, never really managed to crack it. Loved the job, always anxious about something terrible happening. And then something terrible happened out of the blue. I nearly died. I had a condition that's fairly unusual, where my bowel perforated like that out of the blue, and I collapsed, and I had what's now called severe sepsis. So I was rushed into hospital. I don't remember any of this, and I had emergency surgery, and only my son was here. My husband was abroad, and my son was only 16, so he was in a terrible situation. He was told that I was going to die. My husband had to be brought back from Australia. My other child had to be brought back from Sri Lanka, where he was volunteering. It was all horrendous period. And I had emergency surgery, and then I was in intensive care. And I was in intensive care for 8 days. And for 6 of those days, I wasn't expected to make it. Obviously, I did eventually come round, and I was in hospital for 5 weeks. And there's a lot more about this now, but at the time it was only just becoming known about how psychologically damaging ICU is, because you have hallucinations, quite serious hallucinations, and while you're unconscious, it's a very weird experience. So when I came out of hospital, most of what I was concerned with was, I couldn't walk, I'd lost all my muscles, I had to learn to walk again, I had to learn to do everything again. It was a very long process, and I had 3 more surgeries, and overall the whole thing was sort of 3 years. And most of that time I was just physically recovering, gradually, walking and learning to walk again and so on. And I didn't leave the house for about 6 months, apart from just walking around the block. But obviously my anxiety level was quite high, because all my life I've been very anxious that something terrible was going to happen out of the blue. And then something terrible did happen out of the blue, which completely confirmed that I have been correct all this time to be terribly anxious about something happening out of the blue. So my anxiety levels were even higher, and that's not helped by the whole hospital experience. So after about 3 years, when I was really finding it very difficult even to just, get in the car and drive to a supermarket, I was very disabled by anxiety. My GP said, really, we have now fallen into a category where you've got post-traumatic stress disorder from what happened to you. And so I'm going to send you for therapy again. Now, obviously, over the years, I'd been sent for therapy for anxiety several times. So I'd had psychoanalysis, and I'd had psychotherapy, and I'd had various sort of psychiatric type interventions, all of which have been helpful, but none of which had ever sort of sorted my problems. And so she said, she sent me on a therapy waiting list, and eventually I got triaged and sent to one-to-one with a guy who was a cognitive behavioural therapist and traditional CBT, and went to see him, and he just completely coincidentally had just started training in mindfulness CBT, which was just taking off then. And I think he'd read the Jon Kabat-Zinn book, and he kind of had a bit of knowledge, but not very much. And he said, I really think that, you've spent 50 years trying to think your way out of this stuff you have, and how's that work for you? It's not. So we really need to let all that go and go in completely differently, to go in through the body, not through the mind, kind of thing. And I was like, yeah, right. I was so cynical. I cannot tell you how cynical I was. And I went, yeah, well, that's going to work, yeah. And he said, well, okay, we'll just do a meditation. And I was like, okay, right. So we sit there, and he did a very basic, he talked me through about 20 minutes of just, yeah, it included a scan down the body, and it included just following the thought, following your breath, and when you have a thought, letting it go. And about 15 minutes in, I just began to cry completely spontaneously. There was this real kind of release of something. It was very weird, very weird. And so at the end of the 20 minutes, he kind of brought me back and said, well, that was weird. And I went, yeah, it was really weird. And he said, well, clearly something happened there, how do you feel? And I said, well, I kind of feel a bit like I've let go of something. It was really, really interesting. So he said, okay, well, how do you feel about, I'm not qualified, so I can't say that we're doing mindfulness CBT, but there is this book which has an 8-week course, and we could just go through it, and I would be here for you. And, what have we got to lose? So I went, yeah, all right. So that's what we decided to do. So I think the book was the Mindfulness for the Frantic World one, the Danny...
Finding Peace in a Frantic World, yeah.
Danny Penman, which has the CD and stuff. And so I did that. But while I was doing that, because I'm a inveterate internet user, I was kind of Googling mindfulness and reading all sorts of stuff. And that's when I came across Headspace. And I thought, oh, this looks really good. And so I played the first 10-minute one on the computer. And I thought, oh, that was great. Love this guy's voice. He's got this fabulous Bristol accent. He's really relaxed. And I thought, oh, I really like, really feel safe with this guy. So I'll do that as well. So I was doing the 8-week course, but the actual meditations from the 8-week course I was doing with the Headspace thing. And at this point, Headspace has always shown you how many people are meditating at the same time as you. And it was like 110, something like that. Now it's like 50,000. It's been absolutely exponential growth. And there was only a very basic. There was like a 10-minute and a 15-minute and a 20-minute. And that was all there was on the Headspace pack. So I just kept doing them over and over again. And I did the 8-week course, and it was really useful because he was doing similar stuff as part of his training, so we could talk through the things that I found difficult. So it was, it was like having a mindfulness mentor or whatever, and we kind of worked through it together. And then I carried on doing it, and I think I was probably seeing him for about 10 months or so, and very quickly, I found things better. I found things easier, really. So Headspace continued to expand into a proper year's program. So I did a whole year, and then I repeated that year. So it involved different kinds of meditations, not just following the breath, but what's the word? Reflective type exercises and compassion exercises. He covers most of the practice as it's come down via Buddhism, but he renames it in a non-religious kind of concept, not using words like metta, but using words like compassion. So,
sure.
So it was completely secular, and really enjoyed it. And so I started following hashtag mindfulness on Twitter, which I just got into. I never went back to work after I was ill. It took me so long to recover, and by the time I had recovered, I was sort of 59. So I kind of retired. So I had the time to really sort of explore it all, and as I said, I was following hashtag mindfulness, so that got me to Everyday Mindfulness, this Twitter feed, which had been set up originally to draw people to the Everyday Mindfulness website that Gareth had started. And really enjoyed the tweets, thought they were really good. Went on Facebook and Googled, put in Everyday Mindfulness, and nothing came up. And I thought, well, that's a bit odd. He's got all this other stuff. Why isn't there a Facebook page? So I direct messaged him on Twitter saying, "Can't find your Facebook page. Has it got a different name?" And he emailed me and said, "Oh, we haven't got a Facebook page because I haven't got the time and there's only me," sort of thing. And I said, "Well, it's a real shame because you could really drive people to the website by, blah, blah, blah." And he said, "Well, you do it." And I went, "What are you talking about? I'm an old lady, he's in his 30s, this is a young person's world. It's nothing to do with me, right? I can't set up a Facebook page. What are you talking about, right?" So I wrote back going, "Don't be silly." And he wrote back saying, "Well, you seem quite a sensible woman to me. I can't see what the problem is. Just do it. It'll either work or it won't. And if it doesn't, what have we lost? And go for it. Go for it." Right. So I thought, "Oh, right. Okay. Well, okay." So I Googled it and set up a page. And for me personally, it was great because I spent a lot of my time at this point. I was very, new and enthusiastic meditator. And I wanted to read up all about it. So I was following loads of people on Twitter and getting lots of articles to read. So, my whole morning was spent on the computer reading stuff about mindfulness. And some of it was rubbish. And some of it I would think, "That's really useful. I need to keep this article." And then I thought, well, that's what I can do. I can post these articles to our Facebook page because if I found it really helpful and I'm a new meditator, then other people must find that sort of stuff helpful. And I can also link to the blogs and the forums that we're running on Everyday Mindfulness and see what happens. So I started doing that. And people started liking us and following us, and it just built up from there. And now I think we've got 12,000 likes on Facebook. And for me, it's very enjoyable. It's not a job. I find it really interesting. It plays to my skills. I read very fast. I'm I find very quickly whether something's helpful or not. So I can sort of scan a whole load of documents, post the ones that are useful to people, reject the ones that aren't. I really enjoy it, and it doesn't appear to have gone as pear-shaped as I thought it might. So it's been very good for my personal self-esteem, and it makes me feel I'm doing something useful in the world, which is always a good feeling when you're retired. So I think that's it. I think that's where we are now.
That's fantastic. How long have you been meditating now then? How long since you started all this?
I did the therapy in about 2011, so it's 5 years.
Right.
I think Headspace wrote to me recently saying I'd hit the 5 years, and I was one of the early people, so I think I'm a 5-year meditator.
Is it different now to when you started?
I think at the beginning you expect that you'll get better and better at it. And so a glorious time will come when you'll start meditating and you'll spend 20 minutes without thinking at all. That's what I naively thought. And obviously that doesn't happen. And I think what does happen, I think, over a long period of time is that you realise how changeable meditation is different every day. And some days it's fairly easy to, focus on the breath and let thoughts come and go. And some days you can't do it at all. And on a system like Headspace, where you are given instructions, not a lot, but you are given instructions, sometimes I miss the instruction. I'm so distracted. And I think, oh, I was just told to do something there, and I've forgotten and missed it. And that's now 5 years down the line. I still can't maintain it. But I maintain it more often, and I certainly maintain it more often in the day. And I know that very occasionally when I haven't meditated, usually because I've been in hospital or my grandchildren are all over my bed and I can't find any space to meditate, I I notice the difference. I mean, I miss it. I could not meditate. Now it's like cleaning your teeth. You feel like you've forgotten something if you haven't. I feel like that if I haven't done it. It's so part of my life, really. But I think when you do it a lot, you are able to drop into it. In a dentist waiting room, or I've meditated in the car a lot on long journeys. I've just said to the people in the car, I'm just going to chill out for 20 minutes, and I think you do get able to drop into it much more easily because it's kind of practiced.
I was also interested when you said about if you don't do it for a while, you can kind of go down a bit quite quickly. I think that's been my experience as well. It's very much a practice,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
not just something that you can, not just like a sort of an exam that you pass that you never have to do again, kind of thing.
Yes, although again, I would go back to what I said in the other interview about encouraging other people to meditate. I do think there are people that perhaps don't need to do it every day. I think there are people whose basic level of their natural level of mindfulness is higher.
Mm, mm,
It's difficult to say. It seems to me that people with anxiety and depression and physical chronic pain take to mindfulness every day much more quickly. Now, that's partly because they've got a need that they're trying to, deal with, resolve, solve, or whatever, or work with, but also perhaps because if you are a person who suffers from anxiety or worry, that may be, I'm just kind of tying it in with theories about resilience. When I worked in nurture groups, it's clearly the case that some children are born resilient. So you'll get a family which is clearly challenged in lots of ways, and one of the children just sails through, doesn't appear damaged by it, and another one will be completely unable to function. So that there's some innate resilience in some people to life's difficulties. I sometimes think of it as a thermostat setting, that you have a thermostat setting for what triggers anxiety for you. And mine is really low. It doesn't take very much at all for me to be anxious. But I know other people whose is much higher, that, they're made anxious by public speaking or a long haul flight, but their day to day life isn't beset by anxiety at all. So I'm not sure whether those people would necessarily need to meditate every day. I don't know.
mm.
I can't imagine being those people.
No, I suppose that's the bottom line, really, isn't it? Yeah. I think that's fantastic. Normally, I ask quite a lot of questions, but you just told everything in one go, and that was brilliant, and an absolutely fascinating story as well. Is there anything you'd like to add?
I do think this question about I can't think what the word is. It proselytizing when you're pushing your agenda. I
Yeah.
do think the question of encouraging other people is quite hard. I know even in everyday mindfulness, some of us have wanted our partners or our children to meditate, and they're really resistant and they won't, and it's annoying because you think your life would be really so much better if you did this, blah 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 blah. But you just can't do that. You can't make somebody meditate, and you can't make somebody be mindful. I think you can challenge people and say, somebody says to you, oh, I'm worried about this in the future, and you say, yeah, but right this minute everything's fine. This absolute second, you're absolutely fine, aren't you? And the thing that you're making a big deal of may not even happen, so, and I'm absolutely confident that whatever happens, you can deal with it. So let's just enjoy this moment we're in. You know what I mean? You can do that kind of talking.
Yeah.
And I talk around mindfulness all the time to everybody. So it becomes part of who I am, is making those kind of challenges to other people's thinking, really. And I think ideally I would try and model. I have a friend who is a meditator who's also a yoga teacher, who when I'm with her, she just gives off this fabulous zen-like calm about everything that happens, and I think that's what I'm looking for. That's what I'm looking for. Now she's been meditating for donkey's years, and I also think she just is amazing. But that's what I would like to be. I'd like to be that kind of zen person where people say, oh, how come you're so calm faced with blah 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 blah? But obviously I'm not calm, so it doesn't happen, that kind of thing doesn't happen. But it would be nice if it did. That's my kind of, my intention is to be more and more mindful in order to achieve some kind of ability to accept whatever happens.
That's a fantastic way to end it. I would have said thank you ever so much, Barbara. That's been a really, yeah, it's been a really fantastic chat. Thank you.